The knock came just as the sun was lifting over Redstone County. Marcus Rowe was still nursing his first mug of black coffee, the screen door propped open to let in the early breeze. Out on the pastures, mist clung to the grass like smoke from a dying fire. It should have been a quiet morning, the kind he'd grown used to since his father passed the ranch down to him. Instead, a man in a pressed polo shirt and shiny leather shoes stood on the porch, envelope in hand. No introduction, no smile. Just a curt, "You've been served," before he turned and walked back down the gravel. Marcus frowned and tore the envelope open. Inside was an official notice stamped with the seal of the Maplewood Estates Homeowners Association. The words blurred for a moment as he tried to make sense of them. Your 1,500 acres have been lawfully transferred to Maplewood Development LLC for unpaid association dues. His eyes narrowed. Dues? I've never joined an HOA in my life. He read the claim again, slower this time, and the kicker hit him like a punch. The land was listed as abandoned. Abandoned. The word tasted bitter. Just last week, Marcus had mended fence lines in the southern pasture himself. He'd pulled calves in the middle of the night, sprayed thistle by hand, and spent dawns like this one watching over the herds. Abandoned? Not a chance. By mid-morning he was pacing the porch, the paper still clutched in his hand. When his neighbor, Jonah Pierce, wandered over to borrow a wrench, Marcus shoved the notice at him. Jonah's eyes scanned the page, his jaw tightening. They've lost their damn minds? You're not even in Maplewood Estates. I told you, Marcus said. My father never signed a thing. I never signed a thing. We've got the records to prove it. Jonah shook his head. This stinks of Vivian Harland. She's been pushing for development for years. Talks real pretty about progress, but everybody knows she plays to win dirty. Marcus knew the name well. Vivian was polished, ruthless, always in control of HOA meetings. If she was behind this, it wasn't an accident. It was a plan. He sank into the old rocking chair his father had once claimed as his own, the wood creaking under his weight. The ranch stretched out before him, sunlit and quiet, as though nothing had changed. But the paper in his hand said otherwise. This land wasn't just dirt and cattle. It was bloodline. His grandfather, Elijah Rowe, had scraped and clawed to buy the first 200 acres back in the late 1920s, when black landowners in Texas were rare and often unwelcome. Elijah endured banks that refused him loans, neighbors who wanted him gone, droughts that nearly broke him. But he held fast and he never sold an inch. His father, Samuel Rowe, carried it forward, expanding, protecting, working the ground until every fence post felt like part of the family. Marcus could still hear him saying, "This land is your backbone, son. Treat it like it's alive and it'll take care of you." And now, on a random Tuesday morning, some HOA notice claimed to erase all of that. Marcus stared out at the fields. A hawk cut across the sky, circling slow. The land was alive, same as it had always been. He wasn't about to let a forged piece of paper say otherwise. He folded the notice carefully, slid it into the pocket of his work shirt, and muttered to himself, "They picked the wrong man." By noon, the story had already left his porch. At the feed store, conversations dipped when Marcus walked in. A young ranch hand pretended to study a display of salt blocks. Two men at the counter spoke in that careful way people do when they want to be overheard. The word abandoned had traveled fast, sticky as burrs on denim. Mr. Talley, the store owner, slid a receipt across the counter and lowered his voice. "Folks are saying Maplewood filed a transfer. You hear about that?" "I heard," Marcus said, folding the paper. "What I haven't heard is how an HOA sells land it never owned." He didn't waste the rest of the day on speculation. He drove straight to the Redstone County Administration Building, its limestone steps hot under the early afternoon sun. Inside, ceiling fans pushed warm air around stacks of manila folders and a counter bell that had lost its ring. A clerk with square glasses and a nameplate that read Angela Klein looked up. "Can I help you?" Marcus set the notice on the counter. "I need to see what was filed on my parcel." Angela scanned the document, frowned, and tapped at an old keyboard. "There's a recorded sale last week," she said. "Seller, Maplewood Estates HOA. Buyer, Maplewood Development LLC. Attached affidavit. Statement of abandonment." "Who signed it?" Marcus asked. Angela clicked again, squinting. "Vivian Harland, HOA President. Notarized by a mobile notary out of Denton." She looked up. "Mr. Rowe, do you mind if I ask, are you a member of this HOA?" "Never have been," he said. "My father never was." Angela's fingers hovered over the keys. Then I'm not sure how she stopped herself, professional instinct reasserting. Would you like certified copies? Every page, Marcus said. And a receipt for the recording stamp. While she worked the copier, he stared at the seal on the notice. He'd seen that shade of blue before on envelopes that announced tax bills and jury summons. Paper always arrived dressed in certainty, even when it was a costume. Outside, he called Jonah Pierce. They recorded a sale with an abandonment affidavit. Jonah whistled low. Bold. Stupid, too. Anybody in the county can testify you've been working that place every week. They're counting on speed, Marcus said. File it, start the machines, make it feel inevitable. He drove back by the north fence on impulse. Survey flags had sprouted like weeds along the property line, day-glow orange, the kind developers used when they wanted to look official. A white pickup idled by the far corner lot. A man with a clipboard pretended not to see Marcus approaching. You with Maplewood Development? Marcus asked. The man gave a noncommittal shrug. Just here to mark utilities. Utilities for whose land? According to our records. Your records are wrong, Marcus said, voice level. You put a paint mark on my side of the line, I'll invoice your boss to scrub it off. The man swallowed and climbed back into the truck. At home, Marcus spread Angela's packet across the kitchen table under the same yellow lamp his father had used to reconcile books in lean years. The abandonment language was boilerplate, the kind of phrasing lawyers grabbed when they wanted to sound ancient and inarguable. But one sentence snagged him. No evidence of active use or maintenance within the previous 36 months. He laughed once, humorless. 36 months contained drought repairs, a rebuilt barn roof, 2 calving seasons, and a new wellhead he paid for in cash. He opened the old cedar box Samuel Rowe had kept locked beneath the bed. Inside lay the family's paper spine, tax receipts folded by decade, plats with penciled notes, a photograph of his grandfather Elijah standing beside a line of cedar posts, the caption in blue ink, First Fence, 1931. Beneath a stack of deeds, his fingers found a thinner envelope marked in his father's hand, easements and exceptions. He slid out a map annotated with arrows and dates, then a notarized letter from 30 years ago detailing a land swap that had allowed Maplewood's roads to curve where they now did, without touching Rowe pastureland. In the margin, Samuel had written, Keep original, they push when you sleep. Marcus set the letter beside the affidavit and felt something steady drop into place. Vivian might have paper, but so did he, older, heavier paper that still smelled faintly of ink and courthouse dust. His phone buzzed, a number he didn't know. He let it go to voicemail. Then another. He silenced the device and listened to the house settle around him, to the ticking of the wall clock, to the soft exhale of a dog asleep under the table. The world had not ended. Someone had simply tried to redraw it without asking. He gathered the documents into a clean stack and slid them into a folder labeled Row E, Title. On the cover he wrote 3 lines in block letters. 1. Certified copies obtained. 2. Affidavit holes identified. 3. Next, confront the source. He turned off the kitchen light and looked out over the pastures silvering under dusk. Rumors were wind, records were rock. Let Vivian talk. He would answer in granite. The morning after he found the affidavit, Marcus Rowe drove back into town. The courthouse square was already humming with pickups angled into diagonal parking spots and the faint smell of biscuits from the diner drifting across Main Street. He pulled his hat low and walked into the county clerk's office, the certified folder under his arm. Angela Klein spotted him and gave a wary smile. Back again so soon? Something this big doesn't sit well overnight, Marcus said. He slid the affidavit across the counter. Look at this line here. They claim no evidence of maintenance for 36 months. You know that's false. Angela adjusted her glasses. I can't officially confirm that, Mr. Rowe. She lowered her voice. But I've driven past your pastures myself. That land is worked. Her words steadied him, but the system wasn't going to fix itself with whispers. He thanked her, tucked the papers back under his arm, and walked across the street to the Redstone Gazette office. A bell above the door announced him, and inside, the smell of ink and newsprint hit like memory. Behind a cluttered desk sat a young reporter with a ponytail and too much coffee beside her. Lena Torres. She looked up, curious. "You're Marcus Rowe," she said. "I heard something about your land. People are saying the HOA filed on it." "They didn't just file. They forged an abandonment claim," Marcus said, placing the affidavit on her desk. "This isn't a mistake, it's theft on paper." Lena leaned forward, scanning the document. "Do you have proof they lied?" "More than proof," Marcus said. He opened his folder, showing the map Samuel had annotated, the easement letter, the stack of tax receipts. "They didn't count on me keeping every scrap my father ever touched." Lena's eyebrows rose. "This is bigger than a bad HOA meeting. If you'll go on record, I can run it." Marcus hesitated. His father's voice echoed in the back of his mind. "Never let someone else tell your story before you do." He nodded. "Run it. But run it straight. No spin." By the time he left the Gazette, the square felt different. Conversations hushed when he walked past. One man muttered loud enough for Marcus to catch, "Should have sold years ago. Progress don't wait." Another spat tobacco into the gutter and shook his head. Marcus ignored them. But when he reached his truck, he found a flyer tucked under the wiper: "Support growth. Don't let one man block Maplewood's future." At the bottom, the Maplewood Estates HOA logo stared back at him. That night, Jonah Pierce dropped by with a six-pack. "They're moving fast," Jonah said, handing him a beer. "Vivian's already holding closed-door meetings with the board. Word is she's promising the county new tax revenue if they back her play." Marcus exhaled slowly. "She's buying allies before I can show my hand." "Then maybe it's time you stop playing defense," Jonah said. Marcus looked at the folder spread across his kitchen table. Deeds, maps, receipts, the bones of his family's fight to hold land for nearly a century. It wasn't just defense anymore. It was a counterattack waiting to happen. He set his beer down, tapped the folder, and said, "Then we'll give them a meeting they won't forget." That Friday evening, Marcus drove out past the pecan groves to visit his Aunt Gloria Fields, the family historian. Her small brick house smelled faintly of lavender and old books, and every wall was crowded with framed photographs, sepia portraits of stone-faced ancestors, faded Polaroids from band raisings, and pictures of rodeos long past. Gloria hugged him hard, then studied his face. "What's wrong, Marcus? You look like someone just took the wind out of you." "They're saying I don't own the ranch anymore," he told her, explaining the HOA's claim and the so-called sale. Her eyes narrowed behind her glasses. "That's Samuel's land. Your grandfather's land. They can't just take it." "They already filed the paperwork," Marcus said. "But I'm not letting it slide." Gloria disappeared into the back room and returned with a worn leather-bound folder. She placed it on the kitchen table like an offering. "These are the originals. Deeds, tax receipts, mineral agreements. Elijah kept them in a safe for decades. You'll want to go through every page." Marcus opened the folder with careful hands. The pages smelled of courthouse dust and time. Ornate lettering declared transfers of land in the 1930s, signatures in ink that had long since browned. He traced the name Rowe across generations, each page a battle won against drought, debt, or prejudice. "This isn't just about land," Gloria said softly, placing a hand on his arm. "It's about respect. If they take this from you, they'll think they can do it to anyone." Her words landed heavy. On the drive back, the folder sat beside him on the truck's bench seat like a passenger. Every mile of gravel reminded him that his fight wasn't only for himself. It was for Elijah, who bought those first 200 acres when black landowners were rare, and for Samuel, who'd patched barns through storms so Marcus could inherit a working ranch. That night, he spread Gloria's documents across his kitchen table, yellow light pooling over them. He read until his eyes blurred, cataloging every page, marking every date. Somewhere in these records lay the counterweight to the HOA's scheme. And he would find it. By Monday, the pressure was visible. Survey flags multiplied along the north pasture. A contractor's truck idled by the fence, its driver scribbling notes on a clipboard. Marcus strode over. "You with Maplewood Development?" The man adjusted his cap. "Just marking for expansion, sir. They told us this was phase 2. "This isn't their land," Marcus said flatly. "Tell your boss he's trespassing." The man gave a half shrug, uneasy, then drove off. At the feed store later that week, 3 different people asked if it was true he'd lost his property. Each time Marcus answered the same: I didn't lose a thing. It was stolen, and I'm taking it back. But the whispers kept growing. Flyers showed up in mailboxes with slogans about progress and growth. Local gossip painted Marcus as a stubborn roadblock, clinging to the past while others pursued opportunity. One evening, retired schoolteacher Francis Doyle pulled him aside outside the post office. I don't know if this helps, but I've seen Vivian hosting late-night meetings at her place. Wesley Drummond's been there, and so has a man from the developer's office. Folks say they've been planning this for months. That word, planning, set his teeth on edge. This wasn't improvisation. It was a campaign. That night, Marcus returned to the leather folder. He flipped past deeds, tax records, and surveys until his eye caught a handwritten note in Samuel's script attached to a map of the subdivision. The scroll read, "Acquired mineral and ground rights, Blocks 3 to 7, 1990. Marcus froze. Blocks 3, 7, that was a huge chunk of Maplewood Estates itself. Dozens of homes sitting squarely on land Samuel had secured decades earlier. If the note was right, Marcus wasn't just defending his ranch, he owned the ground beneath their houses. The realization hit like thunder. The HOA thought they had leverage. In truth, they'd been tenants on Rowe land all along. Marcus leaned back in his chair, heart steady now. The fight had just changed. He wasn't merely playing defense anymore. He had a weapon they couldn't see coming. By sunrise, Marcus was on the road to the Redstone County Archives, a limestone building that smelled like dust and lemon oil. A clerk with a bolo tie and a name tag that read Royce Flannery listened as Marcus slid Samuel Rowe's note across the counter. Acquired mineral and ground rights, Blocks 3 to 7, 1990. Royce pursed his lips. That'll be in the basement vault. Not digitized. He disappeared down a narrow stairwell and, after a long silence filled with the click of metal drawers, returned with a leather-bound ledger the size of a toolbox. He opened to a brittle page, laid a magnifier on the text, and tapped. Here. The entry was clean and old, a 1990 land swap agreement between Samuel Rowe and a subdivision developer, granting the Rowe family perpetual mineral and ground rights to Blocks 3 to 7 beneath Maplewood Estates. Signed, notarized, recorded. No sunset clause. No ambiguity. Marcus felt his pulse steady. Can I get certified copies? Royce made 3, each stamped with a raised county seal. Keep them flat, he said. Age like this doesn't forgive creases. Outside in the bright morning, Marcus called his neighbor Jonah Pierce. It's real. We own the ground under half that neighborhood. Jonah whistled. Then they've been tenants without knowing it. Next call, an attorney. Marcus had a name from a rancher in the next county, Reed Jameson, property disputes only. Reed answered on the second ring, voice calm as gravel. Marcus summarized, kept it tight. Bring everything, Reed said. The abandonment claim, your tax receipts, and those 1990 copies. If this holds, their paper tiger just turned into a house of cards. At Reed's office, maps bloomed across a conference table. Reed traced the subdivision with a pencil, then tapped the clause that mattered, perpetual and transferable. They can't sell what sits on rights you hold, he said. We'll move on 2 fronts, petition to void the HOA's sale and, separately, a landlord action on Blocks 3 to 7. Pressure from both sides. Won't that spook the homeowners? Marcus asked. Maybe, Reed said. But your fight isn't with families. It's with the people who weaponize paperwork. We'll tailor notices toward the board, not the kids riding bikes in cul-de-sacs. On the drive home, survey flags fluttered along Marcus's north fence like a warning he no longer had to heed. He stopped, photographed each one, and emailed the images to Reed with coordinates. Then he set his printer humming, copies for a fireproof box, a cloud backup, and a thumb drive that went to Aunt Gloria's kitchen drawer, family insurance. That evening, under the yellow pool of the kitchen lamp, he rehearsed the next move out loud, calm, factual, no heat. If Vivian Harland had planned this for months, she would have a script ready. So would he. The difference was simple. His script was written in ink 3 decades old. He slipped the certified copies into a fresh folder labeled Ground, Blocks 3 to 7, and set it beside the stack marked Void Sale. 2 fronts, 1 backbone. Marcus turned off the light, looked out at the silvered pasture, and felt the first honest edge of leverage slide into place. Tomorrow, he said to the quiet house. We knock on her door. Friday at dusk, the sprinklers along Maplewood Estates ticked in neat arcs as Marcus parked in front of a two-story brick with perfect hedges. Vivian Harland opened the door before he could knock twice, a practiced smile, a crystal glass of white wine, a tilt of the head that said power lived here. Mr. Rowe, she said evenly. This is a private residence. Good thing I came with public records, Marcus replied, holding up the folder. We need to talk. She hesitated, then stepped onto the porch. 5 minutes. You filed an abandonment affidavit on my ranch, Marcus began. You recorded a sale for land your HOA never owned. But 30 years ago, my father recorded perpetual ground and mineral rights under blocks 3 through 7. That's half your subdivision. He passed her a certified copy. Read the stamp. Vivian's eyes flicked over the seal, the dates, the signatures. For a heartbeat, the veneer cracked, shoulders tightening, mouth souring, before she recovered. Technicalities, she said, handing it back. Irrelevant to the association's right to manage community assets. Community assets stop at your boundary, Marcus said. And your boundary sits on Rowe ground. He held her gaze. You reverse your filing. You tell your board they've trespassed on paper. Or we take this public and to court, both. A black Lexus rolled up. Wesley Drummond, a realtor who'd brokered much of Maplewood's early growth, stepped out, paused when he saw Marcus. Vivian's tone changed for his benefit. We are done here, she said. I'll have counsel contact you. Do, Marcus answered. And tell them to bring a wallet. He nodded toward the quiet street. Because if I'm your landlord, there's rent due. He left before she could answer, the certified copy in her hand like a hot coal. Back at the ranch, Marcus called Reed. She's rattled, not broken. Good, Reed said. File the petition to void first thing Monday. I'll draft the landlord notices time to land after we are on the docket. Meanwhile, get a reporter who'll tell it straight. Marcus dialed Lena Torres from the Redstone Gazette. I've got more than rumor now, he said. I'll go on record with documentation. They met at a diner off Highway 47. Marcus spread the copies across a formica table. Lena chewed the end of a pen, eyes brightening as dates lined up. If this checks out, it's not just a land dispute, she said. It's a story about power trying to erase history and getting caught by it. Run the facts, Marcus said. Leave the sermon to the porch where it belongs. He drove home under a sky crowded with stars, the kind his grandfather once called weather you can trust. On the porch, he set two folders side by side and felt the shape of the next week. Vivian had cameras and committees. He had paper and patience. Sometimes that's all a man needs to move a wall. The Gazette ran the story at dawn. HOA filed to sell ranch it never owned. Decades-old deed gives Rowe family rights beneath Maplewood. It wasn't flashy. It was neat. Scanned stamps, side-by-side timelines, quotes on the record. By noon, the phones lit up. Some calls were angry, accusations about blocking progress. But more were quiet thank yous from old-timers who remembered Elijah Rowe hauling water in the 80s. Within hours, Cedar Ridge Development LLC stepped out from behind the HOA, filing a motion to intervene. Their Dallas law firm sent a letter to Reed arguing Marcus had no standing and the 1990 rights were immaterial to present claims. Reed's reply was 2 sentences, see attached deed. See you in court. Monday, they filed the petition to void the sale. Tuesday, Reed sent landlord notices, not evictions, not yet, to the HOA board and to Vivian Harland as an occupant of Block 5. The language was clinical, acknowledgement of underlying rights, 30 days to negotiate terms, preservation of all communications. By Wednesday, Vivian convened an emergency meeting. Marcus wasn't invited. He parked outside the Maplewood Community Center anyway and watched board members slip inside, faces tight. When they came out, some avoided his eyes. Others looked relieved, as if someone had finally said what they'd all feared. The board had driven off a cliff at full speed. That afternoon, a glossy mailer arrived in local mailboxes, support growth. Don't let one man hold Redstone back. At the bottom, a disclaimer in tiny print, paid for by Cedar Ridge Development. Jonah texted a photo and a single word, nervous. Pressure turned mean by evening. A county action pending sign appeared zip-tied to Marcus's gate. No seal, no case number. He clipped it off on camera, uploaded the footage to a cloud drive, emailed it to Reed and Lena. Intimidation, Reed wrote back. Good. Judges dislike it. The hearing came Friday. In a packed courtroom, Reed walked the judge through the chain: the forged abandonment, the false sale, the 1990 deed. The county attorney mumbled about administrative process. Cedar Ridge's suit tried to box the issues apart. Reed connected them tight. You cannot pretend a man doesn't exist on Monday to sell his ranch and then pretend his deed doesn't exist on Tuesday because it's under your houses. The judge granted a temporary restraining order: no code actions, no further sales, no on-site contacts absent a criminal warrant, preservation of all HOA and developer records, and disclosure of any planning documents referencing Rowe land. Outside, microphones sprouted like mesquite. Marcus said 6 words: "I'm going home to feed cattle," and that was that. The story, however, kept moving. By nightfall, 3 Maplewood homeowners emailed Reed asking how to be on the right side of this. One of them, Clinton Avery, a reluctant board member, added, "We were never told about the 1990 deed." The spine of the fight had shifted. Vivian still had allies. But Marcus had something heavier: the court, the press, and time. The flood didn't come. Something better did: a slow, public correction. Over the next week, subpoenas pried open email chains showing Vivian Harland courting Cedar Ridge months before the affidavit, promising clean title by summer. Minutes from closed meetings surfaced with redactions that looked worse than the words they hid. Under pressure, Maplewood's board called a membership meeting. The room was hot with tension and folding chairs. Sharon Bell, the treasurer turned acting president, cleared her throat and read a statement. The HOA would rescind the abandonment claim, support voiding the sale, and acknowledge the Rowe deed to blocks 3 to 7. A motion to remove Vivian landed with a thud of raised hands. She walked out without looking at anyone. Wesley Drummond resigned 2 days later. Reed negotiated the only agreement Marcus would sign. Title restored to the Rowe Ranch pending final judgment, and then permanent by consent. Written acknowledgement of the 1990 rights recorded against Maplewood's plat. Formal apology from the board to the Rowe family, read into the minutes and printed in the Gazette. No rent demanded from homeowners who signed an acknowledgement within 30 days. Disputes, if any, to be with the HOA and developer, not families. Cedar Ridge to withdraw its motion and pay fees tied to the void sale. It wasn't revenge. It was repair. The judge signed the consent order on a clear morning. Cameras waited on the courthouse steps. Marcus kept it simple: some things aren't for sale: family names, hard land, the truth on paper. Behind him, a few Maplewood residents, people who'd glared at him a week ago, nodded, small and embarrassed and grateful. Back at the ranch, the silence felt earned. Jonah showed up with tacos. Aunt Gloria brought blackberry jam. They ate on the porch, and the conversation wandered to Elijah and Samuel and the first cedar posts set before anyone in this county would sell a black man a gallon of diesel on credit. "Your daddy would have liked today," Gloria said, eyes on the fence line. "He'd have asked if the south gate still drags," Marcus answered, smiling. By evening, the subdivision lights blinked on in the distance. Marcus didn't feel triumphant looking at them. He felt settled. The ground under those homes said Rowe in ink no rumor could wash away, and the pasture behind him said work in a language older than paper. He walked the boundary at last light, palm on posts his grandfather set, boots scuffing dust his father knew by smell. At the corner pin, he paused, breathed, and let the long months drain out of his shoulders. Tomorrow there would be calves to check and a well to service and a stack of letters from strangers who wanted advice on their own fights. He'd answer a few. He'd feed first. On the porch, he wrote 3 lines on a fresh index card and tucked it into the ground blocks 3 to 7 folder for whoever came after him. Keep your records. Tell your own story. Stand until the paper stands with you. The wind came up off the pasture, warm and full of grass. Marcus closed the door on the quiet house, the kind of quiet a man owns, and turned out the light.